Britain declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. Canadian Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie declared war a week later on September 10th. German prisoners of war were captured by Britain but sent to Canada as it was a safer place to house them in the event Germany invaded Britain. The remote location of the north shore of Lake Superior was chosen for 3 prisoner of war camps: Camp 100 in Naze, Camp R in Red Rock, and Camp 101 in Angler. There were many smaller work camps scattered across northwestern Ontario, although the exact number isn't certain. Merchant seamen, enlisted men, and non-commissioned officers were sent to Camp 101, which was close to the rail line. It opened its gates on January 10, 1941. Camp 101 was also the site of one of the most extensive escape attempts in Canadian POW history. In June of 1942, all of the German prisoners were moved to another camp, and a few days later, Japanese internees arrived. German military, merchant seamen, and German Jews were sent to Camp R in July 1940. Prisoners came from Quebec, guarded by soldiers of the Fort Garry Horse Regiment. Shortly thereafter, the Canadian Veterans Home Guard took over supervision of the POWs. The Home Guard was made up of soldiers who served in the First World War or the Boer War and were now too old for active service. In October 1941, all the prisoners at Camp R were transferred to other locations and the site was closed. Camp 100 opened on the 13th of January 1941. It housed mostly German officers. Many prisoners here were sent to smaller lumber camps. Camp 100 closed on April 30th, 1946. It is now the site of Naze Provincial Park. The camps became their own little communities. Camp 100 had barracks for sleeping, 2 mess halls, a kitchen, a canteen, school, cobbler's hut, hospital, tailor's hut, detention facility, and recreation hall. And that doesn't even include the on-site facilities for the guards. Recreation activities offered at the camps included sports such as gymnastics, tennis, skating, and soccer. The YMCA provided sporting equipment, books, art supplies, and musical instruments. The prisoners got to try their hand at some favorite northwestern Ontario pastimes such as hunting, fishing, and swimming. They even participated in games of good old Canadian ice hockey. Prisoners occasionally kept animals. Some were unusual. Prisoners at Camp 100 had a pet piglet, which they snuck into camp from a nearby railway supply car. More unusual still was Camp 100's pet black bear. The young bear became tame after meandering into camp on multiple occasions. The prisoners hooked it to a chain, and so it became the camp mascot. I bet that's the first Northern Ontario black bear trained in German. In the beginning, POWs had the option of working for a very small wage, but this later became compulsory. Those that cut wood were given the incentive of receiving 50 cents per cord. The logs were floated down the river to Lake Superior mills. POWs made a big contribution to the logging industry. One estimate was that of the 98,000 cords of pulpwood harvested for the Pigeon Timber and Lumber Company, 90,000 were cut by prisoners. Deep snow in the winter and unrelenting mosquitoes in summer were challenges. In one bush camp near Nipigon, a group of prisoners went on strike. They were put in confinement until they agreed to go back to work. They finally agreed to resume their duties 28 days later, only because they knew the worst of black fly season was over. Despite opportunities for leisure and entertainment, the POWs were still far from home and family. This led to many attempted escapes. One of the most extensive escapes took place at Angler's Camp 101. On April 18, 1941, the Home Guard had quite the surprise. 28 POWs escaped via a 45-meter-long tunnel. 2 escapees made it as far as Medicine Hat, Alberta, before they were recaptured. Once returned to camp, the 2 escapees were praised by their comrades for their ingenuity. Even the Canadian civilians were impressed, requesting autographs of the 2 clever prisoners. Eventually, all the escapees were brought back to camp. Unfortunately, this was not without fatalities. During the recapture, 2 men were killed and 3 wounded. Between the First and Second World Wars, 187 prisoners died while being held captive in Canada. They were buried in 36 different locations across Canada, but in 1971, all were relocated to Woodland Cemetery in Kitchener, Ontario. After it was announced that the Allies won the war in 1945, approximately 6,000 POWs requested permission to stay in Canada. Permission was not granted. After returning to Germany, many POWs opted to come back to Canada, as their home country was in a desolate state after the war, and there were more opportunities for them here. The experience of prisoners of war in Canada was recognized as a National Historic Event with a plaque erected in Naze Provincial Park on August 11, 2012.